stick a tail on a Rakiri, Zinshiki snarled, after the daughter-son chaser's quarters closed. How? How did I know this was going to end up on my back? On account of that, Rikishi posed in thought, twirling her aside. What's it called? Schoolgirl wisdom? Fatalism, she said dourly. Pragmatism, Rikishi replied brightly. Come on. I have to make a call before we go out. You're coming with me. Okay. Rikishi trapezed along in her wake. Do I need weapons? Where are we going, and who are we calling? No weapons. We are going to the hospital, she scowled, ignoring the third part of her sister's question. Over the last day, she'd wasted perfectly good time between baths, tracking down the human, and had entertained countless ways of killing and eating him for the indignity he had visited on her in past. I have to call a human. I expect to know where Petviri is shortly. Listen to you, networking. That school must be rubbing off. If you keep this up, you'll be sociable yet. Zinshiki felt a childish urge to bite her sister's neck, like when they'd been young, but she forced it down and dialed the code on an omnipad instead. Rikishi tilted her head down and was looking up, giving her big kitten eyes and exposing her neck, teasing her with it. Thankfully, the call connected, removing the temptation. Zinshiki still managed to focus her best. You're pissing me off, but I'm busy expression upon her sister, with a dismissive flick of her sack. She still wanted to bite her, though probably not too hard. Tom Steinberg was in the kitchen, making himself a protein shake when he heard it. Come here, Dex. I'll turn you into a fucking Alabama Hot Pocket. Okay, sounded like Ari had the flamethrower. Eat my ass, bitch. I'll molest your dead body. It sounded like Dex was holding his own. Get knifed, cocksucker! Okay, Amy was going on a knifing spree again. Despite the profanity, Tom started cracking up. The kids sounded just like Modern Warfare 2 lobbies when they played Liberation Earth, if more mild. Almost immediately, Tom knew he'd done messed up. Now the kids knew they could drop that kind of stuff without getting in trouble. Whoops. Oh well, time to salvage it. He walked into the living room. We don't talk like that, Dex. And no molesting corpses, he added firmly. That's weird. Amy and Ari started cracking up. Honestly, the embarrassment would do Tom's job better than he ever could. You two aren't off the hook either. Who taught you either of those words? Honestly, some of the things the pups said when gaming sounded like they just pulled them straight off the Urban Dictionary before the datanet filter deleted everything, and the decency guidelines meant that nothing funny would ever reappear. Shorvanti could be such helicopter parents sometimes. Now that Tom thought about old things, time to be a good father. The job had kept him away from the kids for too long. Not the kids, the pups. That's what Edixie kids were called. Pups. Alright, finish this game, then start an online match. I'll join on the Office Omni. Maybe it was just because sharks were toothy, but the kid's grins grew like someone had stuck him with a bike pump. Daddy worked hard, but he played hard too. They quickly ended the match and jumped into an online one as Tom ran around to the office. Tom always did his best to make sure he wasn't one of those old fuds who got on the kids for playing disrespectful games. Fantasy was fantasy, and he told them his war stories once they got old enough, so they knew the real rebellion had been nothing like this. Despite having actually fought with the rebels, Tom really enjoyed Liberation Earth. Especially the maps from the Land of Mary DLC. That Baltimore map was fire. He could spawn camper the Otterbar for hours. Lo and behold, once the pups texted him their match code, he spawned right in the Fells Point region. He started as the Zealot class. Zealots had a banging close-range spread gun attack, and on the Baltimore map they also had a unique active ability where they could frenzy NPCs and cause a riot. And the people in the voice chat were already getting on him for it. Anyways, he turned on the mic. "Come at me, stiffies!" You could hear a pin drop. "There's a man playing this game?" Someone asked, awed. "Yo, take a selfie!" Tom's inbox started pinging with pictures of boobs. "Get off the game and let your girlfriend back on." "Personally, I think it's very cool that a man's playing this game." Tom was going to break a lot of hearts in these next 15 minutes. "I'll have you know I'm happily married and playing this with my kids." Downstairs, he could hear the pups groaning. "That's okay, I like older men." "Get off the game and make them dinner." "Got room for a co?" Tom ignored the comments and made his way down to the inner harbour, using the riot ability to swarm the kids playing Marines and getting called a stiff several times. Honestly, it wasn't the proper video game experience without the trash talking, so he was willing to put up with it, even getting a few in himself. Apparently, Fuzzy Clams 69 really didn't like being called a Rakiri fucker, and rage quit on the spot. Tom was about to nail the capture the flag event when his on-the-pad pinged. He had a phone call. On that number. That number was work. Zenshiki kept her Asayek from flickering impatiently as she made the call. Raikishi was watching, after all, and despite a desire to lightly maul her sister, there were appearances to maintain. The on-the-pad rang a commendably brief time before a male voice picked up. "Hello?" "You are the human who provided transport for me the other evening." Raikishi raised an eyebrow at that, and Zenshiki kept a satisfied swish out of her Asayek. If she couldn't maul her sister, she would at least make her burn with curiosity, which, for Raikishi, was so much worse. "I require a service from you." "Miss, I don't know who you think you've called, but—" "As well as my boyfriend, after the banquet," she said flatly. "You are a spy, you owe me a debt, and I require your services." Zenshiki could hear a plethora of electronic mayhem in the background, while the muted sounds of televised gunfire went off. The voices in the background gave defiant cries and a mixture of Shovanti and what she now recognized as human speech. It sounded like one of the human shooting games that her youngest sister, Kalis, loved in her spare time, and she forced herself not to roll her eyes. This was a serious call, a matter of the fourth Kahachakt, and if Raikishi thought her contact was frivolous, that would make her look bad. A moment passed as the male divvied before. "How did you get this number?" he replied, sounding irritable. Irritable was fine so long as he complied, but still, appearances mattered. "No, you're one of Kalira's friends, aren't you? You probably dredged through the datanet or asked the princess for my actual name?" "I would not presume on my connection with her, particularly for something I can do myself," she replied, enjoying the moment. It was one thing to toy with her sister, but a professional? And both at once? Her Asayek trembled with satisfaction. "You deposited my boyfriend at the tide pool before returning me to my domicile at the academy, giving me 2 opportunities to see your rental vehicle." "Yeah, so?" "When you dropped him off, I took the copy of your rental contract." "Oh." The male sighed heavily, and she granted him time. No one liked to be caught in a mistake during an operation. She understood these things. After a moment he said, "I appreciate your discretion, but look, I have a cover to maintain and—" "Fermented fish entrails for an hour." Zenshiki let a certain heat creep into her voice, as she resisted the urge to paw at her hair. Raikishi sat up straight at that, and Zenshiki pretended not to notice. There would be questions afterwards. "My older sister disappeared a few hours ago in an autocab, and my warband cannot trace her. You are connected with certain persons who can." Your sister? That's, the 10th Kahachakt? Zinchiki's elaborate plan to convince the human froze in her throat out of sheer surprise. Still, she had an audience of one, but that mattered, and she sniffed, covering her hesitation. Since you understand, you will pay off your honor debt. You lived, didn't you? Besides... You are doomed, bitch! Hey, language! I'm on the phone, the human shouted, then sighed in exasperation, returning to the call. Besides, it wasn't like your boyfriend is going to... If you fail to help me, my warband will know where you live, she purred, her voice rich with anticipation. Raikishi cocked her head to one side, but it didn't matter. If the human understood the Kahachakt, then she had him. She wanted to indulge in the moment and roll about in pure satisfaction. Miss, I don't take well to threats to my family. I would never threaten your family. Either help me find my sister, or I will tell my Aunt Sunchaser you like Pezrin women. What? You know the Kahachakt, so perhaps you know about Pezrin courtship rituals. She could be there all the time, for weeks. She can sing very loudly. She plays the reed pipes too, though quite badly. Fine. Get me the details, I'll make some calls. Well, looked like the evening with the pups was kaput. Tom Steinberg kept the game running and continued playing. After all the time away for work, he owed them all so much more, but this was a start. Warbands weren't just good, they were some of the best, and he'd seen them firsthand. He could vouch. That being said, there were some places where he was just better. Like, a warband wouldn't have access to every security feed in the Imperium. With that in mind, Tom went AFK for a moment, and pulled up the CCTV feed from the Duchess's palace. That was still a lot of footage. He keyed the search engine to give him footage with serious movement within the last couple hours. Most of it was guard rotations or just staff stuff, but a few clips showed a grey-furred cat girl skulking around. That was probably the one. Tom poked through and found all the footage. Going by the timestamps, he put it in order. There were times that you didn't want to sneak around. Sometimes being on camera and acting natural was better than not being seen, and it seemed she knew it. Putting the footage in order, Tom watched her round the corner on the Duchess's estate, and then, in the last camera feed, she disappeared. Okay, that meant she was off the property and acting properly sneaky now. A quick search revealed no movement in the woods aside from various animals, so Tom widened his net to cameras in the immediate vicinity of the property. And, to quote an old Nazi from a movie that the Imperium had seen fit to ban, that's a bingo! Tom had watched that movie with the pups. They'd loved it. Someday the Imperium would pay for blacklisting Tarantino, but anyways, it seemed that his missing girl had been good, but not perfect. She managed to avoid the cameras, but when she got to the main road, a camera way down the street had spotted an indistinct grey figure climbing into an autocab. Probably only worried about her family. Should have gone the extra mile. Heh. Still, that made things a lot easier. Tom called up the cab company from the work Omni. It would display as a call from a security company. Imperial Transport Services, said a snooty male voice on another line. Good evening, sir, Tom said in his most official voice. Imperial Security Services is calling to inquire about a cab that stopped near Duchess Eliana's estate near, I'd say... Tom read the timestamp. 8:12 p.m. and... He checked the stamp again. 14 seconds. Since the Inquisition had blanket perms as a security company for matters like this, companies were obligated to provide the requested information. Somebody go missing? The voice on the other end chuckled, far less snooty now. I got you, baby. He must have loosened up when he realized it was another man. Okay, so Autocab B375A47 stopped by that address just outside the woods. That sound like the one? Tom reviewed the footage again. Yeah, that's about right. Where did that passenger drop off? The entered destination was... The man on the other end gave a boisterous laugh. The tide pool. All right, thank you. Have a good night. Tom hung up and closed the security feeds. He had a game to play with the pups, and this next part didn't require a screen. They were currently rushing the Upper Fells map. Damn, he occasionally visited strip clubs there in college. Usually severely wigged out on MDMA. Of course, it suddenly occurred to him. Evie'd been real hormonal as of late, and he'd been on standby with that amazing Adixie seafood and some bacon roses. But he didn't think even he could fix things as she found out he was going to a strip club right now. Speaking of, why would Petveri be going to a place like that? Besides the obvious. Everybody got horny or bored and decided to go spend the night watching boobs jiggle. Dicks swing? Still, that place was expensive and... Wait. Oh. Who was the boy Tom had thrown in the dumpster with Sinshiki? Hadn't he been a tide pool employee? Oh, lordy. There was a love triangle going on. Speaking of which, there were two girls in game chat fighting for his attention. He ignored both. He'd been pondering his options before, but this could be good for a few laughs. Anyways, that explained why the Persian was so concerned. Speaking of, he texted her number back. Found your sibling. Send location and I will pick you up. Be ready. Even as Tom texted her, his mind recoiled at the thought. What did he owe this girl? He was Thomas motherfucking Steinberg. Persian or not, she was just some college girl. And besides, it was 1 hour in a dumpster full of vomit. Maybe an hour and a half tops. But there'd been a boy. And she could tell her entire warband where he lived. Alright, maybe I do owe her. And I know I don't want to explain this shell to Avie. Now how to do this? Helcom was so polite that handling them was easy, up to a point. That op on Terra 6 had shown him those little grey bitches hit a mean streak. There were obvious ways of dealing with Shulvanti. With a lot of effort, there were even ways of dealing with Rakiri, but it wasn't like you could always get carrion easily. Adixie took a lot of effort, though Avie had won. But if you got a family of Pejrin loose in the house, there was only one thing to do. And I don't want to move. As if to make the point, he threw a bunch of landmines around the Ottobar spawn point and hunkered down to camp. The close-range attack on the Zealot class was great for the tiny bar. He was just wrapping up the match when the Pejrin girl texted back. Sorry kids, time for me to go to work. Keep the game going, I'll be home soon. Petveri's initial plan had been to find her sister's prize and claim him for herself. She'd been filled with confidence when she left Duchess Eliana's estate, and besides, it beat having her tail chewed even more by her birth mother, and it wasn't like she'd been confined to quarters. As the eldest sister and a skilled combat scout with 2 kills already, she was clearly the better catch. Given a few minutes to talk with him, he'd see that she was far more suitable to be his first wife. Zenshiki did propose to him, didn't she? She swept the thought aside as unworthy, as she was driven through the night, though she nearly blacked out of the tire pool within minutes of entering the foyer. The exhibits on display served as a menu of sorts. Shaking off any sign of hesitation, she drew herself upright, scowled at some of the curious other patrons heading inside, and trooped her way toward the end of the corridor, where it opened out over a vast hall covered by towering galleries, while lights speared down to the center of the room. Stupefied, she stared down to the stage as a full 12 of men from a dozen different species danced and... Dark Mother! That's more men than I've ever seen at one time. They're even taking off their... So, you're the one past is on about. The shrill voice in her ear nearly made her leap in surprise, and she whipped around at the Shovanti man dressed in bartender's livery. Calming her heart, she drew a deep breath. There was no scent of another peasant in the air, and besides, it covered her dismay. Besides, blushing was for species that lacked fur. You must be Zinjiki. The little bartender was shorter than her by almost a foot, but he stood there boldly, despite his revealingly tight top. Seemingly oblivious to the chaos of the room as the hum of clinking glasses and cheering women filled the air, he grinned up at her and offered his fist. I'm Jaminek, known past since he was only 7, though actually he was here a bit before me, you know. Come on over and let me get you something. Past will be down in a couple of hours since he has the late shift. I bet you wanted to surprise him, am I right? Indignation rose inside her chest at his mistake. Male or not, her coat was clearly silver. The light was dim, but it wasn't that bad. I'm going to make a fool of myself. What was I thinking? Crestfallen, a touch of despair washed over her, and her Asaic drooped listlessly. If she went home now, she could simply say she was getting some distance, after being dressed down by the warband. There was no shame in taking stock of things. Hey, don't look so down. He'll be down later. The little shill must have caught Bethfury's expression, and he winked as he pointed to the nearest wall. Come on, no girlfriend of Past's is going dry on my shift. My bar is just over there. Let me get you something. What did someone say in a place like this? What could she say? To think she'd imagined tempting a boy with tales of her almost earning a kill ring. It seemed absurd after she spotted the food menu out in the foyer. There were no prices listed, and given how well the other patrons were dressed, she'd already heard one woman at a nearby table bragging about the bulging pouch of jewels she'd bought to tease her waiter. I must have forgotten my credit chip. I should probably... Hey, you think I'd charge you after that banquet this shell? Come on, I just made up a batch of cerebrillium scorchers, and one has your name on it. Jaminek grinned up at her, and started heading over to the long glass counter underlit in electric blues. It's on the house. Here I am, Tom Steinberg, quite possibly the most dangerous spy in the Imperium, and what am I doing? Going to rescue a cat girl from a strip club. Admittedly, he'd always wanted to do the gentleman spy thing, but this was no place for the sharp suit, so he simply tied his hair back into a ponytail and got to work. It wasn't fair. He really was the most dangerous spy in the Imperium. True, there were plenty of interior bitches whom he wouldn't want to go free rounds with. Memories of his recent encounter with a Shovanti trucker made his neck ache sympathetically. Even so, he had an entire destroyer's worth of heavily armed commandos at his beck and call, even if it looked like a yacht. I'm a man with resources, damn it, he grumbled as he entered the main hall of the tide pool. Thirsty women were already calling out to him, and one that looked like a purple couch was waving a ruby at him with a leer of anticipation. Hard no. And yet there was no denying the Pezrin girl had talked him into this. If AV ever found out I was here. Some things just weren't worth the risk, but fortunately he was adept at working in the shadows, merging with people and not being seen, spotting those who didn't want to be seen, and, thank God, the girl was just over at the nearest bar. The tire pool was notoriously discreet, and thoughts of having to check upstairs with the menu. He shuddered, banishing the idea from his mind. Thankfully, even in an exotic bar with 101 species on offer, possibly, literally, busty cat girl still stuck out in the crowd. Maybe it was all the anime. Tom swallowed the thought down and listened to her as he drew near, though it occurred to him that there wasn't much to listen to. And I just wanted to see him, you see? To show him I'm all sorts better than my sister with her big ideas and... The Pezrin girl, Patviri, was upright on the stool leaning forward and flashing off her cleavage at the bartender when he drew near. And
A huge tract of land. Gosh, a whole ranch.
A whole ranch? The Shilvanti male was looking at her sympathetically as he walked up. Given the money being flashed around, a whole ranch was probably a big tip from some of these bitches. Oh, well, hello there. Can I help you? Kind of. Name's Tom, and I'm her ride home. Tom looked from the bartender to check the Pezrin girl out. She was nursing the remains of a glass as she looked back at him blearily. She was fit, which sorta was synonymous with Pezrin, with a grey coat and copper eyes. None of the Stone Mountains had looked like that, and he wondered if it was a family thing. The copper eyes, not the fit thing. Nice to meet you, Tom. The little shill was looking at him warily, but cocked his head to the girl. Pedveri, is Tom who he says? I don't want to let you go with just anyone.
Oh, human Tom. So you're the one my sister's always talking about.
She waved him off with one delicate hand. Tom looked over the nails.
Yeah, I suppose.
She heaved a resigned sigh.
Might as well. She my little Shinshiki. Just makes my day.
What's that and how much has she had? That'd be the Cerebellum Scorcher. 4 ounces of Old Happy Endings, Cambrian whiskey, an ounce of Ubeki juice, 2 ounces Blue Grail, garnished with an Ubeki rind. Damn, that's a lot. We talking zest or rind? Tom totally wasn't gonna try making one of these himself. It sounded like a Boilermaker with extra steps, and weird proportions. She's had 2. The little bartender dejectedly reached for a mop as Pedveri downed another. That's her 3rd. I've never seen anyone have more than 1.
And dish is my sister's ha-ha-ha-hacked.
She grabbed for Tom, but Tom was just that good. He slid right out of her sweaty grip. You did your job, man. And I almost made it worse by calling her sister's boyfriend. The bartender grimaced. She's had such a rough day. Maybe he was just mourning his evening with the pups. On the other hand, maybe he had no sympathy.
That's my sister's fiancé, Shorta.
Pedveri corrected, as she drew herself up heroically in the stall, then deflated onto the counter, mumbling,
That makes me third wife. Gonna have to do all the guttering and all the cleaning.
Come on, Anna Puma. Let's get you back to your sister. She's worried. Tom thought about explaining he wasn't Tom Warwick, but what the hell? If it got her out of the bar and out into the parking lot, it was all good. Are you okay to stand?
Ha! I was born ready. I am the best scout.
Pedveri reared up from the bar and flexed her claws.
I am the knight.
A moment later, the knight slipped out of her bar stool and slid to the floor. Damn it, and no coffee anywhere, Tom muttered. What was it with the Shilvanti and common decency? This was really making him want to do a line of Molly once again. The autocab ride had put Sinjiki in a mood. Not only had her birth mother already known about past, it also seemed like everything she had done was open knowledge, or at least open enough for her band sister to chat about it all the way over. Even her sister's stunned reaction to the menu of carnal opportunities on graphic display in the entry failed to amuse her. She would have her revenge later, but at the moment they had to find Pedveri and get out of there. She had other responsibilities than chasing her eldest sister around. Even after texting her hakakt and explaining she had an emergency with her warband, not being present at the hospital for Dess's operation felt like a violation of at least 5 of the kakachakt, all to chase after her band sister. It was such a senseless waste.
Since she'll still be dead as she's ruined my courtship of past, cracks and shards, if I didn't admire her skill, I'd... Look at that! See? There's my sisters over there. I told you, I'm the best scout.
Even Raikishi was distracted by the apparition of their sister, being carted unsteadily their way by a human male who had imprisoned her in the bucket of... Shaking away the distressing memories, Nshiki's eyes narrowed to golden slits, as passers-by whistled and cheered for Petviri to take the male home.
My little sisters. The big hero and the big powerfire. Come to globe, probably.
Petviri wove one way as the human Tom Rosenberg corrected their course and wound unsteadily around a grinning party of leering women on their way in. He didn't look particularly happy, but she didn't particularly care. Honor debts were sacred trusts, and the notion of them when involved with family made her think of those 4 words that meant so much at a time like this.
Better you than me.
She nodded respectfully to the human and studied him a moment. Unlike their previous meeting, she was not trying to support her prospective lover while locked in a cycle of dry heaves, and she studied him a moment in the darkened hallway, lit only by the spotlight spewing down vast sculpture in the courtyard, while softly backlit under the warm glow of artistically displayed sex workers. And the flash as Raikishi took a picture. The Rosenberg human scowled at the flash and glared at them both. "Hey, I got your sister back all safe. What's the deal with the picture?"
"Oh, it's okay. This is for her, not you."
Petviri glared bleary daggers, while Raikishi bounded up and down on her toes.
"So you are a real human. There are lots of stories, but I haven't met one of you before. Wow, you are big." "See? I told you they had my back."
Petviri paused to belch with no trace of dignity.
"All ready for a knife in it." "You are mistaken,"
Zinchiki replied coolly, distressed at the loss of face their warband was experiencing every moment that strangers walked past. The entire incident was unseemly, and if word got back that they were here, it would be a serious loss of face.
"What's the difference? You got the warband land. You're the one who's found as a husband. You're going to take my place on the council. You even got your own hacked."
Petviri hung her head morosely, her slurred voice heavy with gloom.
"She's got us a ranch and a husband. What do I have? Just a lousy 2 kills."
Zinchiki pondered mentioning that they were even as far as kills now, but the time seemed inappropriate. The 20 Kahachakt were good for prioritizing honor and properly mocking one's enemies before you ate them, but it seemed ill-suited to the situation. What would her Hahakt say? What had she learned from the Great War simulation? Doubtless it would be something consoling, admirably meant to lull one's enemies into a sense of comfortable security while rearming. She sighed and did her best.
"You have us." "Oh, that's all I need,"
her eldest sister wailed, before slumping against Rosenberg Tom, which proved that Zinchiki was learning to read human body language. Every part of his expression clearly said, "Are we done now?" She was well pleased at the knowledge. He didn't even have an Asaiak to show third-degree exasperation. Still, that was something to consider at another time.
"Petviri, how can I put this gently?"
She paused, searching herself to find a caring and careful way to diplomatically handle her sister. Something that would make her Hahakt proud, since Raikishi seemed to be fighting off a fit of the giggles. Considering she had photographic evidence, that was fair.
"You fucked up,"
she said flatly, settling on the pragmatic view. Petviri shook her head blearily, trying to focus.
"I just wanted another kill. Just one more and...
So much for the comforting part. It was clearly time to follow through, and she slapped Petviri across her cheeks, her Asaiak showing second-degree disdain.
"I swear, some days I could just rip your face into a new asshole. I do not care about the council."
Patvira's competitive streak had always been such a pain in the thorps, and this was not the time and definitely not the place. She sighed, trying to explain as her sister focused at last.
There will be other spots on the council. Rikishi is going to be Pathfinder. Kalis is too young, and it will be years before the youngest kids start work. What does it matter?
Patviri shook her head, the slap having done nothing at all.
I'm in enough trouble with Harash. My birth mother's gone to kill me. Do you imagine I'm going to let that silly bitch kill you? You are my band sister, Kaz replied, with steel in her voice. That is my privilege. It's such a great photo.
Rikishi nodded happily, and Zenshiki made a note to get a copy. One loved one's family and care for the warband's prosperity, but good blackmail was still priceless.
You do that for me?
Patviri shook Rosenberg off unsteadily and focused on her.
You're all I ever wanted. Someone to blame. I understand,
Zenshiki nodded, finding her band sister's eyes.
Remember that I've never stopped loving you as a sister. Or started.
Patviri drew herself up with a superior gaze, though she wasn't quite able to carry off in her usual style.
Lick me. You will taste me on our husband first, Zenshiki replied.
It was good to put a bandwife in her place, after all, and speaking of places...
If you will take my band sisters to the estate of Duchess Eliana Varun, your debt to me is closed, she said grandly, savouring her triumph.
Even Rikishi had taken notice, her sight quivering in third-degree speculation.
Rikishi, see Patviri home, and do not discuss this shell with the human. But I saw all kinds of interesting stuff, and too interesting. This human does not have a contract with me, she said, clarifying matters, and was gratified to see Rikishi get the message. All right, then.
Rikishi pocketed her omnipad happily before shouldering their sister.
Where to?
Tom Steinberg drove in silence, eager to both get this thing done and not get involved any more than he already had.
So...
The tawny, tabby girl in the back seat with the yellow eyes started, but Tom was far more distracted by the drunk girl pouring at him from the passenger seat. "Stop that," he said firmly.
Sure. How many girls have you sex with?
Patviri slurred, her copper eyes fixed on him as she toyed with her hair. She probably thought it looked alluring. It wasn't.
Hey, are you a virgin?
If Tom's eyes hadn't been boring holes in the road, he would have face-palmed hard. That old Rage comic meme where the guy face-palmed all the way through his head came to mind. He could almost feel Tawny in the back seat, struggling not to wince. It briefly occurred to him that meeting one of the fabled humans, the fabled sex alien that he was, might hurt a lot. Simply face-palming would probably be the end to a bad day, and a major blow to Patviri's confidence. Won't be me, though. I already have my sexy space babe.
So, you're sure you don't want to fuck?
Patviri leaned real low, her head inches from Tom's lap. Not in a sexy way, just a drunk way. No, I don't want to. There should have been a burp. Any self-respecting sorority girl back home would have at least rolled down the window or covered her mouth. Maybe it was a Pezrin thing. The guy at the bar said he thought she was an easy drunk. It didn't matter. With a sudden and very heartfelt Patviri turned it loose, all over his lap.
Ow, sky and shadow!
A glance in the mirror told him Tawny was covering her mouth and cringing in embarrassment. Not that it was her fault, or really helped. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Tom was so glad he hadn't worn his suit, especially when Patviri puked again. Heads were gonna roll. He then had a sudden epiphany that made him wince, in a way that had nothing to do with the pungent smell of warm, chunky puke that was seeping through his pants. Between the smell and the feeling as it spread, he wanted to open the door and dive out, regardless of the fact that he was still driving. Great. How am I going to explain this? Okay, let's see. The fact that I left and she puked cannot be denied. Okay. A friend got drunk and needed a ride. Puked all over the car. Good thing far too many of the PTA dads couldn't hold their liquor.
Oh, I told her that Rhino was off,
Tawny said expansively, as she leaned forward to snap a picture on her Omnipad.
I mean, who cares if they come with their own carving knife?
Thanks, Wait, what?
Have you ever posted something on the datanet you regretted later?
Raikishi felt the Omnipad in her hip pocket and watched as the human drove through the night. But Viri was out cold now, and with the windows down, the rush of air got rid of the smell. Well, most of it. Sure, she could smell it, but who knew how acute human smell was? She'd avoided talking about Shell, just as she'd been asked. It was a bit unfair because the job of a Pathfinder was to get information, and sometimes you had to do that by asking questions. Well, and lying, of course, but lying still required small talk. All the best lies needed a foundation, didn't they? It was a truth that every Pathfinder knew, and if the humans had a reputation as fighters, well, that didn't necessarily mean they were good traders, did it? It still needed to be tested. So far, no Pathfinder had POTUS notice of a warband taking a contract in human space, or their star system, or whatever they had. A homeworld, certainly. Whatever it was, no one had taken work there, so who could tell? This was groundbreaking stuff, and Sunchaser would be proud. Of course, the lies were the important thing. You had to start there. No one was going to just admit how cheaply they could be hired up front, would they? There was always one of the big ones, though that came after all the foundational work, which meant knowing every species very exactly. Cultural anthropology was the cornerstone of every working contract. Once you knew how to make small talk, it came down to knowing when to look like you were holding out. After all, no one believed a lie you just offered up for free. You had to hesitate a bit around the edges, so it looked like you were being forced to give up the information. That mattered too. But for just riding home with Pet Viri up front, well, maybe if she got on his good side, he'd help carry her to the door. That left casual conversation. The human, who was named Tom but turned out not to be Zinshiki's Tom, had already rebuffed Pet Viri asking if he was a virgin, but at least the conversation had picked up after she passed out. So much for the small talk, but being able to mend relations was vitally important for a Pathfinder too. "Have you ever visited a strip club?" was a corny line she'd used to break the ice with a guy. Well, would have done. She'd never met a guy to try it out on, and this Tom had been coming out of one, so that was sort of a moot point. It was awkward, though. Human men were supposed to be like Shilvanti women, and Shilvanti women were like Pezrin women. Kind of. Just with less style and more weight and less speed and... well, kind of like Pezrin women, so she should be able to relate to him like a girl, right? Asking him how many girls he'd had sex with seemed indelicate. Besides, Pet Viri had asked that too.
I just love my Omnipad, don't you? How long do you think you could do without yours?
She asked brightly. It gained her a long look and a grunt.
I use it to track people down and kill them.
Me too, he grunted. So, a guy who was like a girl who was like Zinshiki. Great. Besides, it would be indelicate to point out that was how Zinshiki had found him. Thank the Dark Mother, there were only a few miles left to go before they reached the estate.
So Zinshiki says you're a spy?
At least that got her a look.
Terrific. Tell you what, if you promise to share our contact details, I'll make sure that Zinshiki doesn't turn you in if there's a reward, she said solemnly. She had good night vision even in her warband, and the lights from the dash let her see the blood rise in his cheeks. I promise no one will know but me. Well, and Zinshiki, I guess.
It was so weird seeing that with people who didn't have fur,
but she took it as a good sign. Anyway, we're really sorry she threw up in your front seat like that. She shrugged. Saying it was the front seat was more diplomatic than saying it was in his lap, and at least it was still technically true. I bet it will scrape right off when it's dry.
Tom just sighed. I really don't want to remember any of this. It was just a case of getting to know people. Her band sisters just had no finesse. Hopefully Zinshiki was getting on at the hospital.